Hello everybody, this is True Crypto 28, Mr. Anderson on Twitter. Just I wanted to do another quick video. This time it's going to be a little bit of a strategy video. I'll keep it short as well. Let's jump right into it. Basically, I know last week when we had a little alt rally, I put out a post and the alts started running. We already had a few that were jumping 40, 50, 60, 70%. In situations like that, if you get one of these scenarios where you're having a real crash in alts, or in stocks, or really, it doesn't really matter what you're trading. If you're seeing a crash, there's a play that I use on RSI. And basically what I do, I'll go ahead and jump into EOS here. I don't like to use trend lines, so to speak, on price, but I will use them on RSI. And I'll show you why I don't use them on price. I mean, if you're going to draw a trend line, you're going to go, what, here to here. Maybe you'll decide to go from here to there. Maybe you would have went from here if you got really cute into this area. It's very tough. And I apologize. What I should have told you is you're going to bring up a daily chart, right? Because this is a reversal play for a daily chart. So we start with the daily, and I'm showing you what not to do, which is not to draw your trend line on the actual price. But what we can do, what I like to do, is I'll go into RSI. I don't even need the price up. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm going to look at the last 2 points, which were swing high candidates from the RSI. When I say swing high, what I mean by that, it's going to be a lower high, obviously in a downtrend, but this example, it'll be right there. Pretty clear, you had a downtrend. And what happens? Once it's broken, which is at this level, you basically find yourself in a position to where, did it pop here? Did it pop there? Not sure. But I'm just going to run through a couple real quick. So that's EOS. Let's go on to Litecoin and do the same thing, just to give you an example. So some things were already running, some weren't. We were trying to find the ones that were not or had not. And the idea was pretty simple. Draw a trend line, such as this, and see when you break it. And if it had not broken, it was about to break, you could enter after the break, which I'll explain that in a minute. So it looks like in this case, it didn't quite break there. It did break there. So if you got in any point, obviously, after this, you still could have did well. I mean, that's a healthy move. Let's look at another, and I'll get into a little more detail. We'll go to old Tron, everyone's favorite to love or hate. Tron, same situation. What are we going to do? I know this one because I was doing it specifically that same night that I put out the tweet. So I can give you more detail on it. But basically here we had it. It was perfect. It lined up perfectly. 3 touches. You don't need 3 touches, by the way. You're just going to go from the lower high to a lower high and wait for the break. So let's draw it right around there. And then I'll show you what happens. You end up having a break right there. But what do you do? First thing I'm going to show you is this. Give me one moment to put this tool on, because we don't want to trade it on a daily time frame. I mean, we want to find it on the daily time frame. So once I find it, what I'm going to do, that was on the 18th, right? I'm going to bring it down to a 4-hour now to find my entry, because I got my signal based on that. We closed. It was right at the close when we had that conversation. Let me go back to that area, make sure that I'm in the right spot here. Let me just bring it to price down. And yeah, this was basically the close right around this level. Yep, that's the first of the next day. And you're in a situation to where you say, okay, here I am. What do I do now? Well, what we're going to do is we went ahead and we took it based on it breaking out on RSI, right? So there's a few things you could do. You can then look to price action if you want and say, hey, look, it's taken off. Let me jump in. But what I do is I now say, remember, this was my spot that we located it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to now look for a higher high in RSI. Why? Very simple. Momentum before price. It's a simple rule. Remember it. Don't forget it. So at this point, I could have went back and said, all right, the highest point on my RSI was right there. Excuse me, I didn't pick the right tool. It was right there at this particular level. And I was waiting for it to break out above that level. Now you could say it touched here, and if you would have went in on this particular bar, you could see it still worked out. But let's just say we didn't. One, if you got in, you would have had to wait a little bit and you would have been patient, which is fine. But let's just see on a 4-hour basis, right here, you would have got in. See, I like to keep it as realistic as possible because you would have had a close here above that line. So technically that would have been a trade signal. So the fact that it backed up a little bit, I don't want to say, oh no, let's take it here. That would have been better. Sure, it would have been better, but the reality is the signal would have been right there. So you would have entered right there. And at that time, let's just call it 196. I know it's 1.9 cents, but I'm going to call it 196 and change. Call it 197 if you want. So you entered 197. It pulled back, a few cents, about 193. So you're still fine, not a big deal. You didn't make a lower low or anything along those lines. And then what you see is it continues on and gives you a clearer breakout. Now, if you wanted to wait for the clearer breakout, you could have done that as well, obviously. And just to give you some numbers, if you waited for a closing bar on the 4-hour, that would have been right at around 201. So we're looking at 197, 201, whatever it is. Either way, by playing that breakout, first we found it on the daily, and then we played it on the 4-hour. And what happens? It starts running up. Exactly what we want, right? But now what do? How do we get out of this trade? Well, there's a couple things you could do. You could say, hey, I'm in it on a 4-hour, so I'm going to wait for the market structure to break down. But with alts and the way the crypto space has been in general, do I want to give it that much room? Not really. I'm not really looking to sit this out, see if it's going to make a higher high. It says maybe it doesn't, drags on. I mean, this is going to drag on for days ultimately, and you make a lower low in this case, and you're out. No, what I do is I'm going to drop the time frame again, and I'll drop it either to a 2-hour or a 1-hour going from the 4-hour. Basically, I'm cutting it in half. Typically a 2-hour. So go back to it. We know we entered around here, and now we're rolling up. So how do I get out of this trade? Well, the way I'm going to get out is something very similar. I got in by RSI, so I'm going to get out by RSI. What happens? 2-hour RSI, we peaked at 75. Okay. Well, typically with RSI, you're going to have, again, remember, it's going to be momentum before price. So when you're going up, it works in the opposite way, in that typically what you'll see, if you're on the right time frame, is you're going to find a situation in which the price will go higher than the RSI. What I mean by that is you might have RSI spike to 85, come back down, and then come back only to 78, but yet the price will be much higher, and that's a perfect sign to get out. So how would that have worked out? Well, basically the way it did work out is we saw the price go up to, RSI to about 75 on the 2-hour. We had the pull back, so we're watching closely. And then it tries to break out again. Now in this case, it almost made a little bit of a double top. It looks like it kind of actually did close slightly higher on that bar. But the bar you have to look at is this one, because that's where the price spiked. You see that? See how the price here spiked up? So technically it would have went higher on this 2-hour bar, but you lost it. So you might say, all right, you know what? I'm cherry picking. I'm not, because it happened that way. But the idea is, I know kind of to get out in this situation, and this was a perfect exit right around the 23 level. So you're talking about a 20% gain no matter how you look at it. Even call it 15% if you got in a little late. All in the matter of about a day or less. Swing trade basically, or call it a long scalp. But regardless of the situation, if you didn't want to find it that way, you could have also said, all right, you know what I'm going to do? I want to give it some room to run. It did come pretty close to making a higher high. Maybe it did make a higher high. Maybe this is actually bound to keep running to a 90 RSI, which is fine. And if you want to do that, the way you would play it is, one, you could either shed some into this top when you've seen this structure happening, or say the first lower high, now that I put in a higher low, the first lower high is my exit point. And in this situation, that would have been right there. We could see that the closing RSI was about there on that candle. That still gets you out right at about 226. So you're still out in a really good position. And the reason why is because you went and shrunk your time zone. Now you can go lower. You can go down to a 1-hour just to look at it, to give you some perspective of what would have happened on the 1-hour. You end up getting yourself into a little bit more of a situation where you could get tricked a little bit. You're in on the 1-hour here. Things are looking good, but ultimately you get some of these deeper, higher lows, which might scare some folks. And then at this point, you ended up making the higher high, so everything's looking good. But when it faded pretty strong. So you have the risk and the opportunity of basically cutting yourself into pieces if you go too low on the time frame, and I'll show you how the 30-minute would definitely do that, in case anyone's wondering. Now you go down to 30-minute, forget it. Look at this. You look like you're having an SOS here and a little minor breakout and reverses. So Ultimately, what this is basically a distribution happening on a RSI. So what you're looking at here is a process that says, look, I'm going to find it on the daily, but I'm going to take my trade on the 4-hour. And when I take my trade on the 4-hour, I'm going to find my exit on the 2-hour. And that's how you sharpen your skills. That's it. Pretty simple. When I had this up that night, I got a lot of questions about it, so I figured I might as well go over it real quick. I have a strategy for longs as well. Excuse me, for shorts as well. It does not work the same way. A lot of people ask, can you do this on a short? You can. I mean, but you're basically going to be in a situation where, first of all, understand that it's not going to be very often that you see longs just running wild like the way you see shorts. I mean, obviously we're in a bear market. And what I mean by that is you're not going to find yourself in a situation where every single alt is flying into the 80s on a daily RSI. So from that perspective, it's not going to happen anyway. So it's more on an individual basis when one of them is hot and when one of them is running. But just to kind of give you an idea, if you drew a trend line in this situation, you could do it in this manner. And really, I'll leave this for the next video. But just quickly to leave you to the how and the why it doesn't work too well, is you could see that when you actually do get out, even if I sharpen this a bit, when you get your short sign, it's going to be over here. That wouldn't have been too bad. Obviously, you see it dropped from there, so things would have been okay in that situation. But there are better ways, which I'll show you, and I'll explain that and get you in a little bit earlier, probably in this range. All right, True Crypto 28 here, signing out. Thank you all for watching. Definitely plan on doing more of these particular videos. If you guys can help and support, whether it's a thumbs up, whether it's retweeting, anything of that nature, I definitely appreciate it. And